The Yamaha MOXF workstation is a powerful machine equipped with many of the finest functionalities of Yamaha's once flagship synthesizer, the MOTIF XF. There is, however, a glaring exception to that statement. That being, the MOXF lacks the MOTIF's integrated sampler. If you chose to watch this video, chances are you are aware of MOXF's compatibility with the MOTIF's memory expansion cards, the FL512M and FL1024M. Perhaps your MOXF has one of these expansion cards and you have used it with an aftermarket preset pack downloaded from the internet. As impressive and useful as these packs might be, you may be looking to use the functionality of the memory card to load your own personal samples. These could be note-for-note samples from your personal synth collection or simple sound bites, maybe from records or movies or some such thing. The issue is, as I mentioned before, the MOXF, while having the ability to take in and process external audio, as well as the ability to use memory expansion modules just as the MOTIF does, unlike the MOTIF, the MOXF does not have the ability to make samples and waveforms on its own, and as far as I am aware, there is no official companion software that can help us accomplish this. The good news is, although it's not nearly as easy as using an integrated sampler, there still is a way we can get our own sounds into this machine. The bad news is, it's going to cost us some money. Yes, that's right. Before I begin with this lesson, I'd like to potentially save you time by stating up front that what we are about to do requires third-party software, which costs around $70 US. This is most certainly not cheap, but the software is incredibly useful for MOTIF engine power users. I leave it up to you to decide whether or not unlocking this functionality is worth this price tag. With all that said, let's move forward with the lesson. Firstly, make sure that your memory expansion card is properly installed and formatted. Just press the File key, and you will see to the right of the screen whether or not the module is formatted. If it is, you should see exactly how much storage is available. Another thing we should check before going any further is the firmware version of our keyboard. We can check this by pressing the Utility key, followed by the Job key. The latest firmware version should be version 1.12. Press the Exit key to leave this screen. To accomplish what we've set out to do, you'll need the following hardware and software: a Windows or macOS PC, a USB flash drive, and lastly, the key software MOTIF Waveform Editor by John Melas. A link will be available in the video description to his website. While we are on the subject, let's go ahead and download the Waveform Editor right away. He offers more useful tools for MOTIF products on here, so if you want to pay a bit extra, you can get the complete toolset as a bundle. Although that is probably what I should have done, I've ultimately decided to purchase just the Waveform Editor by itself. When faced with the prospect of installing paid software, you might be asking, as I did, couldn't I just put my samples onto the USB drive and put them directly into the MOXF? Unfortunately, no. Raw samples cannot be individually used by the MOTIF engine. They must first be packaged in the format of a proprietary file called a waveform. The waveform builds onto the raw files with a set of parameters dictating how each sample behaves in the system. You'll soon see what I mean. These can easily be created using a $2,000 MOTIF XF, for instance, but without the benefit of an integrated sampler, we need to rely on this software to create and manage our own waveforms. With that said, follow the attached link and you'll be sent to this page here. You can scroll down to download the free demo of the software to ensure that it runs on your computer and that all is working well. I will be downloading the Windows version. Enclosed in the mowave.zip file is the installation wizard. Follow the prompts to install the software in your hard drive of choice and launch the program once installation is complete. The demo version is feature-rich, allowing you to fully explore the capabilities and learn the workflow of the software. However, if you want to actually save your work and export complete waveforms, you'll have to purchase the software to continue. You can find a Purchase button in the Help toolbar. This opens a web page where you can make the €60 purchase via PayPal or share it. If you've decided to buy the software and follow along further, the license key will be sent to the email address associated with your PayPal account. Copy this key and go to the Waveform Editor. Once again, click the Help toolbar, and then from there, open the Register window and paste your key. Now that your software is unlocked, we're ready to fully explore the infinite realm of sampling. For this demonstration, let's get 6 distinct samples to comprise our waveform. Let's say, for this instance, that I want to be able to play a collection of sound bites from classic cartoons using my MOXF. I've gone ahead and made my own samples beforehand by recording my sources in Audacity and exporting them as WAV files. Record and export your samples using whatever software you're comfortable with. When that's done, it's time to take our samples to the Waveform Editor. First, we'll open up a new project by clicking File in the toolbar, hovering over New, then in the drop-down menu, we'll select New MOTIF XF Waveform File. Make sure you're creating XF files, as MOTIF XS files are incompatible with MOXF keyboards. Now that we have a fresh project open, I'm going to import my samples by clicking on the folder icon with the little piano keys. This will open up an Explorer window where I can select the WAV files I want to use. I've placed them all in their own folder for easy access, so I'll just select all of these and click Open. You will see that all of your samples have gone into this list of waveforms on the left. It's very inefficient to have each individual sample be its own waveform like this, so let's use this program to its strengths so that we can assign each sample to its own specific set of keys on the keyboard. We can consolidate these samples into one waveform by selecting all of our samples, right-clicking, and selecting Merge Waveforms. You will see all of your samples become one waveform called Merged. You can rename this to whatever you'd like it to appear as on your MOXF by double-clicking the waveform, typing in a name, and hitting Enter. The next thing I'm going to do is go through and inspect each sample, since I did not polish them beforehand in Audacity where I first recorded them. When you double-click on a sample, you're presented with a number of useful audio editing tools like normalization, for dialing in the desired maximum volume of that sample. You also have the ability to create fade-ins, fade-outs, and crossfades. You can make the audio go in reverse, as well as set up an alternating loop which creates a sort of mirror image of the audio clip where the sample can play forward and backward either once or on an infinite loop, depending on your selection of mode. Finally, and most importantly, in the sample editor, you have the ability to set the start and stop points with the trim function. This is critical for making sure that your sample doesn't have any lag when striking a key. You can adjust the start and stop points by clicking and dragging within the timecode boxes in the bottom left. You can audition the clip by hitting the play button in the top left corner. When you have your start and stop points where you want them, you can press T or click the trim button to cut away the waste. Once you've got all your samples sounding just the way you want them to sound in the sample editor, let's go through and set the keybanks for each one. By default, all the samples in your waveform will play simultaneously anytime a key is struck, with middle C being the default root note, and with the keybank range spread across the full keyboard. The root note in a keybank will play a given sample at the same pitch and speed at which it was recorded, while the keys surrounding the root note will play back the sample at an incrementally higher or lower pitch and rate. Having a key bank with a wide range can come in very handy when you don't want to go through the tedious task of making a note-for-note sample bank of, for example, another synthesizer. The downside to this is your sample will run out of playtime much faster if it is played at a much higher pitch than it was originally recorded. You can think of it like playing a vinyl record at a higher RPM. If you go that route instead of recording each note individually, make sure that the tone you sample is played for a good long time so that it doesn't run out of breath on you when you don't want it to. You can test your samples and their respective keybank programming within the Waveform Editor by clicking on the virtual keyboard with your mouse. But if you happen to have a MIDI controller plugged into your computer, you can use it to control the program instead by entering Audio and MIDI Setup. Click the little computer icon. You can coordinate your audio output settings as well as your MIDI I/O settings in this window. As you can see, I have my controller set up for inputs. I'll hit OK to confirm. To set the keybanks, you will be using this interface just above the waveform preview on the main screen. Here, you can control the volume level of the selected sample, as well as where the sound will come from in the stereo field. You can also select whether the sample plays through once per key strike, once in reverse, or on a loop for as long as the key is held. On top of all that, you can also use the coarse and fine-tune knobs to dial in the root pitch of your sample, just in case you need the sample's pitch to match concert pitch. There are several ways to set your key ranges. One method is by hovering over these boxes with your mouse and scrolling through the keys with the scroll wheel. Then there is the method of trying to click and drag around on these little microscopic keys. These methods are practically worthless and should have been implemented better. Fortunately, there are two other ways we can set them. If you've got your MIDI controller plugged in and at the ready as previously shown, you can simply right-click on the nomenclature in the root note and key range boxes. The note name will begin to flash. While it's flashing, simply push the desired key on your MIDI controller to set the note to that key. If you do not have a MIDI controller connected, you can also use your computer keyboard to type in the desired note. Just right-click on the nomenclature just as before, and, while it's flashing, quickly type in the note name. For example, C3 for the bottom note, and A#3 for the top note. Unfortunately, it doesn't bring up a text box to show you what you're typing in. Instead, it records your keystrokes and automatically confirms it, so you have to do it swiftly and accurately. When you've set up your keybanks just how you'd like, now would be a good time to move your waveform to the desired slot and save your work. It will be saved as a MOTIF XF waveform file, as we specified at the beginning. If you've saved your work and have no further editing to do, you can go ahead and grab your USB drive and put it into your PC. Find where you've saved your .x3w waveform file and drop it wherever it's easy to locate on the USB drive. I've made a folder on this drive specifically for these files. Now, let's eject the USB drive and take it over to the MOXF. In the MOXF, open the File Browser window by pressing the File key. On the left, you should see your USB drive along with its storage capacity. Open the Load screen by pressing the F3 key. In the Type field on the left, you will be given a list of file types that the system can look for. Use the encoder wheel to scroll all the way to the end of the list to where it reads Waveform. If you have multiple waveforms to load in at once, select All Waveform instead. Use the arrow keys to navigate the file directory into whichever folder you're keeping your waveform. You can open folders with the Enter key. I've reached my file, so now I will select it with Enter. Depending on which waveform folder you are working in on the editor software, Your waveform will be in one of these 3 folders. I was working in the User folder, so I'm going to select that folder with Enter. Here it is, showing right up just as I had named it on the PC, along with the slot number I saved it under. Since I already have a user waveform on my memory card occupying a space, I'll have to use the arrow keys to cursor over to the window on the left and scroll with the data wheel until I bring up an empty waveform slot. To load it in, I will press the SF1 key to execute the transfer. A window will pop up to tell you that it's installing. Depending on the file size of the waveform, this could take quite some time, and there is no progress bar for this transfer either, so you'll just have to be patient. Thankfully, this demonstration waveform was only a couple megabytes worth of samples. If you've made a more complex note-for-note waveform, this transfer could take as much as 10 minutes or more. But there it is, all done. That's all there is to the transfer process. But before I end the video, I want to demonstrate a few ways you can practically interact with your new waveform by putting it into an initialized voice patch. Just keep pressing the Exit key until you get out of the file browser. To set up an initialized patch, I'm going to press the Voice key. Now in voice mode, I'll just hit Job, and the window will pop up asking if we want to initialize the current voice. I'll check to make sure that all the boxes shown are ticked so that every aspect of the voice will be blank. Then hit Enter, then Enter again to confirm. Once I exit out of the job screen, it will show that I've got a blank slate. The MOTIF engine's default tone is a dry, piano waveform with no envelope, no effects, minimal, expression, etc. A dry waveform to start off with is exactly what we want for these samples we've just loaded in. Let's change this piano waveform out with our custom set. To change waveforms, just press the Edit key, followed by the 1 key. Then, use the arrow keys to move over to Wave Bank. Then, turn the data wheel to the right to switch it from Preset to User. If you've loaded multiple waveforms, move down to Wave Number and use the data wheel to scroll through until you get to the waveform you'd like to use. The change is made immediately with no confirmation, so whichever waveform you've scrolled to will be readily playable on the keyboard. If you've followed along and done everything correctly, you should hear your custom samples ringing out from your MOXF at long last. While we're here in the Edit menu, I'd also like to show you how to set up the LFO so we can assign it to the ModWheel for vibrato. The pitch bend wheel is ready to go by default, but the ModWheel we have to set up ourselves. To do this, let's press the Common key to open the Common Edit menu. From here, press F5 to open the LFO Editor. Here, you can adjust the LFO's waveform as well as other parameters. There are a ton of different preset wave options to choose from here, but I'm going to just leave it on triangle and get to the part where we actually map it to the ModWheel. I'll press the SF4 key to open the menu that says Box, navigate to Destination, and scroll clockwise until I reach the destination called PMD, or Pitch Modulation. Now that I've set the LFO to affect the pitch of our sample, I'm going to leave the master depth at 0 so that the sample remains defaultly normal. I'll leave it at 0 because instead, we want the ModWheel to dictate the LFO intensity. So to do that, we just press F4 to go into the control settings, and in Set 1 here on the left, we are going to move down to the Destination field and scroll clockwise until we reach the destination called CLFO-D1. Now, just below that field, there's another depth or intensity control just like the one in the LFO editor. This is the one we want to turn up, since this field dictates the maximum intensity of the LFO when the ModWheel is turned all the way up. So, to dial in how intense I want the vibrato to be at max, I'm going to move the ModWheel up to the max setting, and then increase the depth value on the data wheel while playing a note on the keyboard to test it out. I'm going to set it to about 17. Yes, that's perfect. But what if we want it to fluctuate faster? Well, to do that, we'll just go back into the LFO editor with F5, hit F1 to go into the Wave menu, and cursor over to Speed. On an initialized patch, it will be set to a value of 32 by default. But we can increase this to give us a cycle frequency that better resembles vibrato. There it is. Yeah, that's more like it. I have it set to a value of 57, and it's just perfect vibrato for this sound. Once you've made your changes, you can open the Common Edit menu to enter the voice's general settings, where you can give your patch a name and also assign it an instrument category. I'm going to call this one Cartoon FX. So I'll go through and use the data wheel to scroll through the letters, cursoring over to the subsequent characters with the arrow keys. I'm going to put this in the Sound Effects category, and I'll skip assigning it a subcategory, as the samples don't really fit any of these. Alright, now to save our patch, we'll just hit the Store button. Then we'll use the cursor keys and the scroll wheel to pick a user voice slot to overwrite. If you want to hear the voice that's on screen, you can hit the Edit button and play some keys to decide whether or not you want to keep it. I don't think I'll be needing this one here, so I'm just going to hit Enter. And there it is. We can now use this voice anywhere on the keyboard. Now, bear in mind that this has certainly not been the full walkthrough of voice editing on this synth. There's so much more you can do with your waveforms that I've not even dealt with yet, far beyond basic effects application. Surely, if you've been following along, you've seen all the extra stuff in those menus that we didn't discuss, but I do encourage you to explore these things. Maybe go into the editor on some of the preset voices. Take notes and sort of reverse engineer them if you'd like. Well, this was a rather long and, frankly, expensive endeavor, but we've made it to the end. I've tried to make everything as clear as possible, but if you have any questions or there's something I've said here that's inaccurate, I do welcome your input in the comments. If you weren't following along at your keyboard and you need to get back to this video another time, you can, of course, click the like button to file it away in your liked videos for later. I hope this tutorial was beneficial to you, and I hope to see you back around for another one in the future. Thank you for watching.